Definitely we were thinking with my colleagues, and I was personally very much motivated to make as much as possible to organize this linkage, of our country's national strategies with global agenda. And I believe that the monitoring and evaluation, as Honorable Dorothy mentioned, evaluation system is very important. So we started to work with implementation of evaluation, and now we would like to use the system that we are working on, that we're trying to set up better in our country, to work that for localization and nationalization of SDG. So I really believe that the parliament members, they should be and could be more efficient in that. And my personal motivation was that I believe that life in my country might be better because of better management, efficient planning, using the transparency, using the reliable system of evaluation, and the process of localization of SDG is also part of this big, hope and big work for us. And also, I was very grateful to the opportunity for the Global Parliamentarian Forum, where I was invited as participant for different events. I shared my views with the ideas, with partners, with other parliament members from all over the world, all continents. And that was just very great. That inspired me even more. That motivated me strongly. And I'm very glad that I'm part of this forum, of this movement. And I'm sure that then more parliament members will know about these activities, then more members will be involved. I think we'll have more and more motivated, inspired MPs who can do something, who can change the situation. So thank you for the question.
Something's happened to the audio.
Can you hear me?
Okay, now I can hear you again. Okay, thank you. So the second set of questions is really informational. So there are three that came through the notes. One is there an M&E function officially in the government in Kyrgyzstan? And actually, Dorothy Lucks also referred to this as this legal framework as an important element. So I'll ask them sequentially. So is there an M&E function in the legal framework in the government?
We have the legal framework, the special legal framework for monitoring and evaluation that I mentioned before, as we have on the level of the law. And also right now we're developing the new amendments to the law about strategic planning. And this law is very big, let's say, so it was discussed on different levels. Now it's discussed on the last stage on the government before being presented in the parliament. And this is about how the strategic programs, different levels should be linked between each other, who is developing which program, how they are measured, what should be the system of monitoring and evaluation, who is responsible for what. So it's separate the very important, the big legislation, piece of legislation. And now we're just working with the government on that. So there is some legal framework that we have already for the governmental management, strategic planning system, and monitoring and evaluation.
Thank you. So the second question is really about sustainability, and it's what mechanisms are there right now in the government to continue the SDG work and to continue working with the SDGs after a change of government, since the SDGs are probably going to span over several governments?
Yeah, changing the government for our system is not something new. Unfortunately, we have, or maybe fortunately, very often changing the government. But this is because we're just switched to the parliamentary system and trying all the threats, ups and downs of coalitional government. So we have several governments change for some years. But what we try to achieve, this is that the strategic documents, they are developed and approved by different forces, different like players all together. So despite the changes of the governments, the strategic vision and documents, they are working in the country. For example, as I mentioned, the main strategic document, actually it's approved, developed, adopted by all political forces, let's say, starting from the president, then the parliament, the government, the court system, civil society, all players, all stakeholders are involved. So this is the shared vision, the shared document, and despite the changes of the government, this works. So we're trying to achieve the sustainability of the working documents, having them discussed widely with different stakeholders, owned by different stakeholders, and definitely they have that level of the legal acts, some of the strategies and programs. Some of them, they have the status that will not be changed until they expire.
Okay, that's really encouraging. So the third informational question is, to what extent is gender emphasized, and in what ways is gender emphasized in this process?
I should say that we have really a good experience working with gender issues, including the gender budget. We have this separate program like gender budgeting. Now we have the special piece of work related to the gender-separated statistics. Our statistical committee works. And on the governmental level, we also have the separate working groups and committees specifically on gender issues. So they are heavily in our constitution, legislation, and in our life and practice. So the gender issues, they are there, and definitely within the committee chaired by the Prime Minister, Committee on SDG. It will work together with existing commissions. One of them is Gender Commission that monitors the strategy for gender strategy. We have a separate gender strategy in the country, governmental strategy, and also this commission monitors how the gender issues are implemented in the different levels, subsectoral programs, etc. So I think that Committee on SDG under the Prime Minister will be working with different sectoral commissions, including the Gender Commission. And I'm sure that the gender issues, they are widely presented in our legislation, different aspects. They will be definitely inside the big agenda of SDG.
It's very interesting. This description of where gender is located also begs the question on that's been asked by one of our participants on who should lead the process. So clearly you described a very pluralistic, multi-stakeholder engagement. So can you speak a little bit more as to where the leadership should come from, or where it's come from in the case of Kyrgyzstan?
I think the leadership on the SDG agenda will be definitely on the level of National Council for Sustainable Development, whereas the President, Prime Minister, Speaker, and all forces are there. So this committee is responsible on the main strategic document of the country. And since our strategy expires next year, this commission has started to work together with all governments and other stakeholders to develop the new strategy, and it should be heavily based on SDG. So I think that the strategic vector, strategic direction will be here in this the biggest platform of collaboration that is responsible for strategic documents that I mentioned. But definitely there will be the sectoral programs, and the government will be monitoring operationally the sectoral programs, the achievements, the implementation, the committee under the Prime Minister. So as we used to have now this composition of the system, National Council on Sustainable Development, that includes all leaders of the country, develops the main strategy, and the government develops the operational strategy for that. And SDG should be presented, in both strategies, but the government is responsible for operational side and also reporting on that. And the parliament here will be requesting the information, monitoring the process, and participating in both discussions. So we don't have in our country one just, let's say, one leader who will just monitor. It's really a platform. But the operational thing is now to organize the secretariat of the committee on SDG, to organize this work, to prepare the documents. This is the Minister of Economy, which is responsible for collecting the documents, preparing, monitoring. So this will be the empowered ministry from the Committee on SDG under the Prime Minister.
Well, you are certainly giving us a little bird's eye view as to how complex this process is. So we wanted to hear a little bit of your reflection on how, if you were speaking to a country or some colleagues in a country that's a post-conflict country like Afghanistan, where maybe parliamentarians right now are not even aware of the SDGs and maybe evaluation, what advice would you have for them about where to begin to engage parliamentarians?
It's a very good question. Just I remember my very good colleagues, parliament members from Afghanistan, for example, when we met with them recently in Nepal on the big conference within the Global Parliamentarian Forum and discussed that agenda, as well as with many other parliament members. So I'm sure that it starts from information, providing information. So involving people through webinars like that, through conferences on the different level, writing the agenda, I think we'll find the leaders in different parliaments, the people who will be motivated and can explain and tell others. And definitely the next step, it should be presentation, if you want, inside the parliament, because we have 120 parliament members in my parliament in our country, but it doesn't mean that everyone knows about the processes details. They may hear some information, etc. So not all parliament members, I think, not in all countries, not depending on the level of development of the country, economic growth, etc. So it doesn't necessarily that 100% of MPs are aware and deeply understand. So anyway, there should be some informational campaigns. So one of the goals of our Global Parliamentarian Forum is to bring this agenda to the different continents, to raise this agenda, to formate the leadership, and to share, spread this information among MPs. And I think this will be, one of the most important work, to involve MPs, to empower, let's say, MPs with understanding how important raise this agenda and promote these issues on the national levels.
Well, with your response, you're also linking it and underscoring something that Dorothy Lucks spoke about, which is the power and importance of communication as one key factor here in terms of the promotion of the SDGs and evaluation. So let's ask you something a bit more provocative here. Okay, so one step is engaging the parliament, but what about engaging civil society and the local linkages? You spoke about that in your presentation, and it feels like a big daunting piece. So what ideas and actions are being discussed in Kyrgyzstan about this, in the Kyrgyz Republic?
Yes, now the situation with involvement of NGO is different, might be different in different parts of the world. Even some of our neighboring countries, they are in different conditions regarding freedoms, like human rights, involvement and activity of NGO. In this aspect, Kyrgyzstan is a very interesting example because we really have a very strong NGO sector, and they have the voice, and it's not, it's just a very good practice how NGOs, how civil society, expert society, they are involved in decision-making process. Because our mass media and NGOs, they are very active, and actually the parliament is open in our country, so the most critics comes from civil society here. It's very like open discussion. That is why in we used to involve NGO in our discussions in different like programs and strategies development. And I think it's essential. It should be like that if we want real ownership of SDG. So I would really suggest, I understand it, the different realities, as I mentioned, different countries, and it's not always like that, so active NGO sector. But I think anyway, there should be voices, there should be involvement. Some people from different sectors, they should be anyway involved in this, starting from the discussion and all over the process of implementation.
So do you have a women's ministry that is engaged, especially in Goal 5?
We don't have a special ministry, but we have the commission under the Vice Prime Minister, as I mentioned, on gender, that monitors the sectoral gender strategy, all of them, like sectoral strategies. For example, we have even the legislation, like gender-sensitive legislation. If the amendments or the laws come to the Parliament, we have 5 types of expertise for any amendments in legislation. One of them is gender expertise. If the political party forms the list of candidates in our country, we have the like minimum number of women or men, gender that should be represented in the list, working in the government, etc. So we have it represented on like different levels. The strategy,
okay,
not under one ministry, but it's under the like strategy monitored by the Commission.
Okay, so Honorable Nikitenko, if you were sitting in a cafe with a fellow parliamentarian, what are the 3 pieces of advice you would give to this parliamentarian for using evaluation and promoting the SDGs in their country, from your experience?
So I would definitely say that if you really, a parliamentarian, you're a person who was elected by people. So people, they really hope on changes for better. And if we want to make changes for better in our country, we should represent, very maybe simple but very necessary things. This is transparency. This is transparency in decisions. This is, trust from people to the decision makers. This is efficiency in management, in budgeting. And this is reporting to people, from decision makers to people about the result. So this makes the system stronger and the people trust the system. And if we want to achieve all those goals, so without proper management system, without monitoring and evaluation system, it's hardly possible. That is why implementation of evaluation will allow more efficiency, transparency, trust, and all those key things that definitely will serve people.
No, thank you so much. This has been extremely insightful. You've helped us get a little glimpse of how complicated it is and how much work it is and how much enthusiasm and motivation one needs to work in Parliament and work with the SDGs to create change, because it's kind of massive change that's being called for. And also, it seems that linking with Dorothy's presentation, you really helped us see how many stakeholders have to be involved and how many interests have to be balanced. So we really want to thank you for this this insight. It's fantastic to have your leadership, and this has been an inspirational presentation. The comments have really been very, very heartfelt. People are, we're very inspired, all of us here, listening to you, and it's great to have also our discussant give us a bit of the framework within which you operate, so we have the theory and we have the real practice. We look forward to having everyone join us for follow-up forums, but now please join me in thanking Honorable Nikitenko. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful, wonderful presentation, and thank you for your time and coming to be with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Honorable Natalie. Thank you so much, Dr. Dorothy, and thank you so much, Stacy, for such a wonderful webinar. And my thanks to everybody from the GPF team, Sarita and Geeta, and the three wonderful presenters. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. Isha here.